Thank you all so much for joining me. Each of you are leading AI efforts at a very different type of company. We have consulting, consumer brand, finance, investment. I was wondering if each of you, in just one sentence, could describe your recent AI journey in this time of rapid change. Are you experimenting, scaling, rethinking when it comes to Gen AI in particular? Bill, how about you take us off?
Sure, Sharon, thanks. I think the breadth of what we do, we're scaled in places. If you think about how our people deliver the services to our clients, we've been investing in tech platforms for a long time. Our tax business, our audit business, our engineers. On the place of where we're scaling is how do we actually build platforms, agents, as we think about serving our clients in a different way. So that's the piece that we're still on the journey, but aggressively going.
All right, Muge.
Well, at Nike, everything that we do, we start with the athlete. Our consumer is the athlete, and we put them front and center of everything. So the first project that we started tackling is elevating the consumer journey. And we actually did launch our shopping assistant that's AI-powered before the hype and before it was a trend. The reason why we started working on it was 50% of our consumers who come to Nike do not have a specific product mission, but they have more high level, I have a race coming up, what gear should I buy? And so we started with that latent customer need and started building this conversational search, like, okay, what's the race? Is it a marathon? Is it a 5K? And once you have that intent, you're able to serve your consumer so much more better. Similar to you, depending on whether it's back-end processes or design, different level of maturities of scaling and experimentation.
Awesome. Ravi?
At American Express, we have a 15-year-plus history of...
You've been in the game for a while.
We've been in the game for a while. We've used it in fraud protection for our customers, in credit risk management, personalization. So for us, we started the recent Gen AI part of the journey with more experimenting, but over time, it's become a blend of all three things you said. We still experiment, but maybe in a more focused way. We have a lot of scaling, but very top-down, intentional, and a fair bit of reimagining. You do have to reimagine things to get the full value, but always with the customer at the center.
John?
I'd say much the same way as like all three are applicable to Blackstone proper, like the house. Investing's ultimately like a data arbitrage business. So we've spent a ton of time for, 6 years that I've been there, really investing heavily in the space, using machine learning before, generative AI now. Then if you look across like the massive amount of portfolio companies we have, everything from like Bumble and Ancestry.com to Medline to like data centers, like experimenting and scaling is definitely at the heart of what they're working on today.
Right. Okay, great, perfect. So everyone here has been talking about ROI, the MIT study that sadly found that pilot projects were not necessarily getting off the ground at enterprises. Everyone here wants to hear your stories. So, can you share a story about what it really took to scale an AI initiative and get like a pilot project out of purgatory and into production? Muge, do you want to start off on that?
Yeah. So before I joined Nike, I used to lead Amazon's fashion business. And there we used to leverage Gen AI quite a bit in solving really hard problems like size and fit and returns. So I knew this wasn't a blip, that there was value to be had. And when I came to Nike, I was like, this needs to be in our roadmap. We need to get started. And we put together a centralized team to start with. And we said, OK, we're going to put some groundwork, the platform, the data, the governance. And that worked for a while. But what we quickly realized is that you hit a ceiling on scaling because the central teams are not really close to the business problems. And so what we found is that we were building things, but they weren't what the business actually needed. Yeah. So we quickly pivoted away from that. We decentralized and federated to engineering resources, brought them close to the business unit. When you do that, and when you really start with a consumer problem or a business problem, and then we also added a little bit of a friction, I call it mechanism, my team calls it friction, that every initiative that we're taking on needs to have some sort of an ROI calculation and ties to the P&L. It doesn't have to be super precise, even if it's back of the napkin. Is it engagement? Is it conversion? Is it cycle time to market? Is it time saved? And so going through that journey, we're able to actually deliver real value, attributable, it's tied to the P&L, and that's how we're able to scale.
Perfect. Bill, tell us a story.
Well, I love I think the dirty, if you read the nuance of that Nanda study that everyone loves to quote, there's great success when you get very focused, bounded problems with measurable return that are actually things that matter to the customer, to the market, to the business. So we had the similar early stages. It was how do we invest in all the use cases, and we saw proliferation of great ideas that never scaled. A familiar story, I think, across. Once we started embedding them into we call Sidekick, which is basically the digital OS where people work. We add skills that are very focused on pricing a deal or doing research for a client in a moment that they need or having a better audit decision that you're making. Those were the ones that got real traction quickly. And the fact that we have it embedded in the digital OS of how our people work, it's not a different adoption journey. I think the hardest part is when you try to make any AI solution, probably any broad tech solution, something else that's a pivot out of my workflow or the pivot of a way that I serve my business, my market. It has to be embedded in natural. I wake up every morning, I don't curse gravity because I can't dunk a basketball. I just live under its force. We need to make that the same way of how our people adopt these advances and have them drive impact.
John, how about you?
I mean, I'd say like the biggest reason the MIT survey is true is like, I've seen this for 3 years now, is everybody's running around saying like, give me more AI. And then you ask people, it's like, what is the AI? But it's like, there's this top-down push to not be left behind. So you have a bunch of technologists, a bunch of product folks, a bunch of people across your businesses are saying like, let's use AI to solve every problem. And the reality is you have to, like anything else scientific method-wise, start with like, what is the problem? Then what's your toolkit to solve the problem? And then apply it in a rational and reasonable way to actually go off and address it. And so I think that's why the MIT survey, I believe, 100% is accurate. Internally, like that's the approach we've taken. There's a lot of places where traditional, just a dashboard showing performance, business unit performance, fund performance, et cetera, just works. You just need a database, Tableau, something else on top of that, whatever you want. From an AI perspective, scaling inside the firm, thing we've seen on the generative approach, not the machine learning side, generative side is like ripping apart data rooms is really where we've seen a lot of traction. If you think of like the size and the scale that we invest at, we see hundreds of data rooms in a monthly period. Most of those have hundreds, if not thousands of documents in, sometimes in different languages. That is where it's been like massively enabling for our firm to just invest at a scale and deploy capital at a scale that we need to.
Awesome. Ravi.
A little bit of what you already heard from the other panelists here. We did two things to begin with. First, we started from the top on what kind of things could we add value for our customers with generative AI. We figured there were some things we could do to get more productive. There were things we could do to protect the customers and ourselves better. And then there were things we could do for growth. So we kind of started with that. Then we had a clear hypothesis on where do we want to add the value. So if you kind of think of our core businesses, providing travel services to our premium customers is something we are well known for. So we said, what can we do to make that more personalized? What can we do to make that less call time? Because that then means it's a better, more delightful experience for our customers. So we had a clear hypothesis, so we could kind of test and learn that. The other thing we did, looking at it more bottom up, is what is the enablement that we need regardless of what we want to test and learn? You kind of need the right security rails, the flexibility to try out different types of LLMs. You need controls built in that enablement layer itself. You need a good, clean data architecture. So we invested in those. It meant we went a little bit slower to begin with to go faster later. So that meant we got one thing, which is we could test and learn fast, knowing many will fail. But when something worked, we could scale faster.
Yeah.
So we got to now every one of the thousands of travel counselors in 19 markets use this travel counselor assist, as we call it, for more personalized advice.
Great. Speaking of top-down, I wonder whether you guys could keep it real with us and let us know, as far as the pressure that you get from your board, from your CEO, is that still a big factor? 3 years in since ChatGPT, do you get a lot of feelings of FOMO from the folks above? And how do you handle it?
Without shadow of a doubt. I mean, there's always like fear of being left behind. I mean, and I see it from not just like our company, like Steve Schwarzman and co, like running Blackstone. I mean, there's a want to do more and more and more faster. And you see it across the portfolio companies as well. All of our CEOs, CIOs there get the same push to do stuff. I think it's just trying to always go back to them and ground it in reality. Is like, what's the problem we're solving? To Muge's point is like, what's the P&L impact that it's going to make? Therefore, what's the value of the project, and should we go after it? Because none of these things are cheap. If you have to actually go off and procure all the technology, you have to get your data structured the right way. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes on to enable these pilots, and just the engineering talent needed, they're being diverted away from building new trading platforms, building other platforms that matter to the business as well. So that's like the approach we've taken. That's how you get hassled every day about like go faster.
Every day.
Go faster, make the AI work. But it's just something, I think it's a healthy tension at the end of the day to drive innovation.
I will add maybe a little bit of a different perspective. I do like that my board and my CEO wants us to lean into AI.
Yeah.
Because I do think that, to your point, none of this is cheap, right? Like it's an investment. And so when you're at a consumer company, and you have limited resources, and it's like, where do you spend it? I do feel like the CEO being the sponsor first helps with, okay, keep it front and center. This is going to be an investment area, but also from a change management perspective, right? Some of the things that are consumer facing are a little bit easy because you can just use data to ground yourself and keep on going. Anything that's back of the house, right, like incident detection, cyber, etc., that's fully under my control, that I can say, you know what, we're going to go big. It becomes a little bit tricky when you're like, okay, we're going to apply Gen AI to our marketing approach. And that's where you do need the support from your CEO and the board, and making it a priority makes the collaboration go a little bit more smoother.
Yeah, I love both. There's a great quote from Billie Jean King about pressure is a privilege. So the pressure that we feel, the flip side is the amount of attention we're getting and willingness to invest for a 180-year-old firm like Deloitte. It's the biggest professional services provider in the world. Like, you can get caught in complacency. You can get caught in cynicism. And the fact that I have a different kind of empathy for my clients as CTOs that are dealing with the same pressure from their CEOs and boards, that helps. But I think also, using this moment in time, there isn't an easy answer. And the hand-waving rhetoric and the empty headlines, I think we've done a good job to get our leadership team aware of the necessary investments that, Ravi, you hit on. Like the core infrastructure has to be in place, the data layer has to be in place, the middleware that wasn't something that, it was almost like people would roll their eyes before and say, you're talking about these things again. Yeah. Now it's been elevated. It's not you have to eat your vegetables to have your dessert. It's we can't go fast unless we invest in these ways. And it's elevated some topics that have always been important, but finally I think they're getting the light of day.
For us, it's been a good combination of support for those enablement investments, right? What Bill talked about, that in the past might have been a little bit harder to see the value. Now it's been more natural that that's a key unlock. If you want to test and learn fast, if you want to scale what works, you got to get some fundamentals right. So that's been good support, and it's been good scrutiny, good questions, to always be listening to signals, not be complacent, be paranoid to some extent on what's out there. So I think the pressure I feel is on, are we pivoting our strategy the right way? Are we fast enough? Are we nimble enough? And always thinking about value along the way. Yeah. But I think it's good pressure.
I think just one follow-up on your point on the change management side. I think how many people in here probably are like, well, AI is not going to impact my job. That's like a common phrase that you hear. It's like, well, everybody but me. Let's optimize the spend in every other department but my department, right? So it is something where having top-down support matters. It's also, I think, the biggest impediment to AI adoption, outside of the consumer space and an enterprise space today, is legitimately folks do think I'm not giving up my job. And so there's a heck of a lot of work that you have to put in to like bring people along, and it's way harder than like the automation journey or the RPA journey than what people were on before. So that's like, I'm glad you brought that up because it's like definitely friction there.
John, I think that I mean this piece of the human element to the change journey ahead of us is the story.
Yep.
In the next year, more than any tech advance, and we know there'll be tech advance. And then I also like the idea of what is the culture, what is HR in an increasingly hybrid workforce with digital workers, and I think that's something we don't know yet. I mean, we're inventing the rules of what that will be, but we need them yesterday.
I think one of your opening questions on the role of reimagining, I think it ties to what both Bill and John said. In the past, when you were automating things, you always were thinking about reimagine the process because you don't want to automate a bad process, right? That's a very fast way to get bad ROI.
Yep.
Now with the power of this technology and the opportunities it creates, you have to reimagine the problem itself. And then certainly you have to change the mindset of how you think about the problem. So the change management is broader than probably prior iterations of change management. For sure.
Well, I want to take a few questions, so hope you guys will think about it. This is a great opportunity to questions for amazing tech leaders. I'll come right back to you guys, but just one more before that. I wanted to ask each of you, what is one AI use case inside your company that you're most proud of, and one that didn't work out as well as you hoped? Bill? On the spot.
I think people don't think about Deloitte as a tech and engineering innovation firm. And the fact we have 50,000 product software engineers serving our clients and investing in building platforms and agents in the future of our business too. The fact that we've basically put AI in the heart of our engineering lifecycle and seen amazing productivity gains, and we need more engineers. This isn't us finding a way to right-size that population. We need more, and we're seeing them be happier because the things they had to do before, environment provisioning, documentation, testing, they didn't want to do it. I'm an engineer. That's not what I wanted to spend my day doing, and they're not now. So that's the hero story. I think anything that sniffs of success theater and empty headline, which, in a big organization, you get some of those. Those are the ones that I look at and say, I wish we wouldn't have been as vocal about because they didn't scale, they didn't drive the impact.
I think the most proud of the consumer shopping AI, the shopping assistant. And I think the way I'm looking at it, it's just day one. I do look at it, it's going to be so much more than just a tactical shopping. My vision for that is to become the ultimate coach. Right? Like right now, it's more geared towards, okay, what's the footwear, what's the apparel? But when you step back, Nike has 50 years of athlete, product expertise and knowledge. And we have all these assets, like we have Nike Run Club. We have Nike Training Club. They're all separate apps. They're great, but we've not really unleashed the power of them. And in my vision, AI, Nike AI can bring all of those things together. So the post-purchase experience is no longer, hey, where is my order? That's table stakes. It's like, hey, how did that marathon go? Hey, do you need some strengthening exercises? Hey, what about nutrition? So I feel like that's going to continue to scale. In terms of the ones maybe that didn't go very similar to you, they were one-off. So we did a couple of immersive AI experiences for the Olympics. We did one for our Air Day where the consumers would just be able to create their own shoe. And it was exciting, and it was fun, and it was engaging. Right? Like there were a lot of engagement from a lot of consumers creating their own version. Yeah. But it just didn't have legs to scale. Right? Like it was a one-off. And so hindsight, could we have designed it architecturally a little bit differently so that it could scale? So as we're doing these one-offs, it's not a one-off anymore. I don't know, but we couldn't really monetize them the way I wanted to.
Yeah.
I'm going to probably pick an example for something that Amex is well known for. For 175 years, you probably think of us and think of trust and security. So the example that I'd pick we are most proud of using AI, which started with regular AI ML, is fraud protection. Right? For maybe nearly 2 decades, we have the lowest fraud rates among the major payment networks in the world. And we started using generative AI to take that to another level because there's fraud in voice channels. Someone could take over your account and impersonate you. Catching that is a very different type of problem from classic AI/ML problems. So those are some things we are working on right now and that we are proud of, taking something we do well for our customers and taking it to another level. In terms of something that didn't work as well, it's less about not working as well, but it was harder in a different way than we thought. One of the first things we decided was, this is good as a knowledge assistant, so we'll give our tens of thousands of servicing colleagues a knowledge assistant. And then very quickly realized that, well, we had good data management, maturity on structured data. That's not the same when it comes to PDFs and PowerPoints and all kinds of other stuff. So we had to take a step back and take some time to figure out how to manage that type of data. So it took longer. So that was probably less of not working out, but worked out in a different way, and a good learning.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you a quick example so we can get to questions in the audience. You had a perfect fake out on people. You were like, I'm going to take questions, but I'm going to ask you questions. So,
No look.
Sorry, you raised your hand, and we're all excited to answer questions. You can go first. Like, biggest one that failed is like originally, I remember Mirarati came to our CEO conference 2023, made some quote on stage where she was like, you know, in the next like year, 80% of you are going to be like automated away. And you could hear like all the CEOs, I mean, there's 290 of them were just like, oh my God. Like, and I was like, what world do we live in? Because this isn't real. And you know, like what we did is we went back, you know, started playing around with some of the early incarnations of like OpenAI and the LLMs out there. And the idea is like, let's start with a lofty goal, generate an investment committee memo that basically is kind of the ultimate artifact of like, what do we want to invest in from all data sources in an autonomous way. And it failed miserably. Like the technology is not there to do what humans do today. It cannot think multilaterally across like human interactions, what the CEOs and CFO, what's she like, what's her mental state, how does she think about the company in the forward. And so that was like a big failure, but ultimately we learned a lot along the way. I would say the cool thing that came out of it was we had a whole bunch of like micro apps that we had built to kind of synthesize together to build the IC memo. They've been super successful at giving people an hour or 2 hours back per day in their job, which makes me happy. That's kind of what I view like the overall goal of technology is, just make people more efficient, more effective every single day.
Right on. Let's answer a couple of questions we've got right here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem, man. I don't feel bad anymore. He got your question in.
Yeah.
So.
Say your name and who you're with.
Sure. Vaughn Crow with NVP Capital, a New York City-based early stage venture capital firm. I represent a group of founders who are in vertical AI. They're selling into your organizations. How have your emotions or rhythms changed in engaging with founders who are looking to sell into your organization? Or what's your decision tree today versus where it was and where it's going?
Yeah. I mean, I can start with us. Like, I also run our venture platform where we do seed A and B, so we kind of invest alongside of you in a number of different companies, not alongside of you guys properly, but like early stage stuff. What we do is we look for founders that like are typically they come from industry somewhere in the past. They've seen problems in industry and they want to solve them. So they're super driven to basically solve a tractable problem that they know that they can solve with new technology that's going to make a difference to us. And so that makes like the sales motion a lot easier if you have somebody that comes in that has experience, understands security requirements, understands compliance in our industry, all of like the little nuances of working in the investment area, and then also understands like, you know, how to deliver and talk about the product that they're building. And so that's been, I think, one of the easiest ways for like founders to get into our ecosystem, and that kind of then goes out to all the rest of the portcos as well. But it's just building good products that I can be hands-on with and like understanding the problem.
I just want to take a couple more since we're running a little bit out of time. We've got one right back there. Yes. Hi.
Hi, Barrett Anderson with Future in Review and the SNS Global Report. This is a question for all of you, but I guess primarily also for John and Ravi. You've talked a lot of the conversation this week has been about AI, but it has not been very specifically annotated about which types of AI we're discussing. I think a lot of what you've been talking about on stage is mostly true of generative AI, and I'm curious to hear more from each of you, but specifically about artificial intelligence technologies that you're seeing coming out that you're excited about that might give us a little bit more specificity or ability to deal with financials more directly, So yeah.
Good dude.
Yeah, I mean, we think of stacking all of these types of technologies together is probably where you see the real value.
Yeah.
So we don't get hung up too much on whether it's predictive AI, generative AI, agentic AI. It's really what's the problem you're trying to solve and what is kind of fit for purpose, right? So that's probably a good place to start. Each of them have strengths, and sometimes you're trying to use the wrong technique for the problem at hand. So that's what I would say. So we find that generative AI plays well with unstructured data, plays well with reasoning type of aspects, semantics, understanding intent as examples. But in a lot of things that John and I deal with in financial services, AI/ML, as in traditional predictive AI, is pretty good. But then there are parts of it that you can further enhance with generative AI. So my fraud example, you could do a lot of good fraud protection with regular AI. We've been doing it for 15 years. But then there are sources of fraud signals that could be voice that traditional AI/ML isn't going to work. You're going to need generative AI. And then agentic AI, to just get that out there, is going to play a role in certain types of activities that can be more autonomous as an example, but plugging into the same value chain.
Me to answer?
one
You wanna-
more
I
question,
didn't want to
yeah.
shortchange anybody on questions.
Last
I made
question
fun of
here.
you, but
Sorry.
I can, if you want to stop by afterwards, happy to give my view.
Happy to
Okay,
talk
we've
on that
only
one.
got like 40 seconds here, so.
I'll be really quick. I'm the founder CEO of 1440. We do a lot of AI language translation. I'm curious your thoughts on open source and small language models. Are you guys experimenting or using them today?
Bill or Muge, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, happily. And part of my answer to the previous question was going to be thinking about different modalities and different models and the deployment patterns that are going to be into the question about verticalization. All of that will play out, and open source is a big piece of the equation for sure.
Yep.
So architecting for that flexibility is a huge piece of forward success.
I'm sorry, we've run out of time, but we have so much more to talk about. We can be at the bar later. So thank you so much.
Thank
Give
you,
these
everybody.
guys a round of applause. Thank you.